The observation deck of the stellar nomad hummed with the gentle vibration of quantum drives as Orla stood before the reinforced viewport, watching the swirling nebula paint the void in shades of crimson and violet. Her fur, thick striped patterns of silver and obsidian, bristled slightly as she sensed movement behind her. "Captain Orla," came the small, uncertain voice. She turned to find Kanat, barely into his second molting season, holding something in his trembling paws. The young Valkyrian's ears were pinned back, his tail coiled nervously around his leg. In the dim light of the deck, his youth was painfully apparent, the soft down still visible beneath his emerging adult coat, his eyes wide with that mixture of curiosity and fear that defined cubs who'd seen too much too soon. "What is it, Navigator Kanat?" Orla kept her voice steady, authoritative. The crew needed strength, especially now, 3 cycles into their desperate flight from the convergence. I was cataloging the salvage from Outpost Theta 9, Kanat whispered, stepping closer. "In the human quarters. I found these." He extended a data crystal, its surface scratched and worn. Orla's claws clicked against it as she took it, then moved to the console. The holographic projector flickered to life, and suddenly the observation deck was filled with ghosts. Images. Hundreds of them. Humans, those mythical precursors who'd vanished 3,000 cycles before the Valkyrian expansion, before the convergence, before the galaxy had learned to fear the dark between stars. But these weren't the usual archaeological recordings. These were personal. Orla's breath caught. A human child, small and fragile, with hair the color of solar flares, grinning toothlessly at the camera. Another image, the same child, slightly older, covered in some kind of colorful powder, laughing. Then more. The child growing, changing, learning. "Captain?" Kanat's voice was barely audible. "What are they?" "Memories," Orla said softly, her tactical mind momentarily silent in the face of something so intimate, so utterly ordinary. "These are family photographs." She swiped through the images, and her heart, that fierce warrior's heart that had carried her through the siege of Virillion and the massacre at Broken Ring, suddenly felt too heavy for her chest, because there, in the metalloid frame of human image capture technology, was a story she knew, a small human held by larger humans, protected, cherished. The cub, yes, that's what it was, a human cub, growing stronger, braver. Images of lessons. The cub learning to manipulate primitive tools, to operate machinery, to read star charts on paper of all things. And throughout it all, the same 2 adult humans, their faces marked with something the Valkyrians had thought exclusive to their own species. Unconditional love. "They had cubs," Kanat whispered, moving closer to the hologram. His paw reached out, passing through the light. "The humans, they were cubs too." Orla felt something crack inside her carefully maintained facade. She'd spent 17 cycles believing the propaganda, that humans had been different, special, elevated. The Council of Species had built entire philosophies around it. Humanity hadn't been conquered by the convergence. They'd transcended, evolved beyond physical form, abandoned their children species to fend for themselves. But these images told a different truth. "Yes," she said, her voice rough. "They were cubs too." She continued through the archive, and Kanat pressed against her side, a gesture he hadn't made since his first terrified days aboard the Nomad. The images progressed, the human cub becoming an adolescent, then an adult. But new cubs appeared. The cycle continued. And then, toward the end of the archive, Orla found something that made her entire body go rigid. A photograph of that same human, now elderly, hair, she corrected herself, turned white, holding a Valkyrian cub. One of the first generation, from the early contact days. The human's face bore that same expression from the earlier images, that same protective love. By the first star, Orla breathed. Kanat's claws dug into her arm. That's us. That's one of us. The observation deck's silence was broken only by the quantum drive's eternal song. Outside, the nebula swirled, indifferent to the revolution occurring in Orla's understanding of the universe. All this time, she said slowly, we thought they abandoned us. The council said humans achieved singularity, that they became beings of pure energy, that they left because we weren't worthy of their legacy. But Kanat looked up at her, his young eyes bright with something dangerous, hope. But cubs don't abandon their young, Orla said, her tactical mind suddenly working at full capacity, pieces of a 3,000-cycle-old puzzle falling into place. Parents don't just leave. Not when they love their children. She pulled up the star charts, overlaying them with the timeline of humanity's disappearance. The Convergence's first appearance in recorded history. The dates matched. The Convergence didn't come after us because we were easy prey, Orla realized, her voice gaining strength. They came because the humans protected us, and when humanity disappeared, they were taken, Kanat finished, his voice small but certain. The Convergence took them. Orla looked down at the young navigator, seeing not just a crew member but something more. The archive rotated slowly between them, casting dancing light across their faces. One battle-scarred veteran, one frightened youth. Captain, Kanat said carefully, if the humans loved us like that photograph shows, if they fought the Convergence to protect us, what does that mean? Orla's claws extended, then retracted. Her tail, usually held in strict military posture, swayed with barely contained emotion. She thought of every Velcarian cub she'd evacuated, every family she'd tried to save from the Convergence's endless hunger. It means, she said quietly, that we're not orphans. It means somewhere in the galaxy, our parents are still fighting. And it means, she looked directly at Kanat, that we have to grow up. We have to become strong enough to find them. The young navigator's ears perked forward, his posture straightening. We were cubs, Orla continued, gesturing at the archive. But cubs grow. They learn. They become strong. The humans taught us that, not with words, but with love. And now it's time we honored that lesson. She closed the archive, but copied the data crystal to the ship's core memory. The images would be preserved, shared, studied. The truth would spread. Set course for the outer reaches, Orla commanded, her voice ringing with new purpose. We're done running. Kanat moved to the navigation console, his movements suddenly confident, purposeful. Coordinates locked, Captain. But why there? Orla smiled, showing her fangs, not in threat, but in fierce determination. Because that's where the Convergence is strongest, and I intend to send them a message. She looked back at the viewport, at the vast emptiness beyond. We're coming for our family, and heaven help anything that stands in our way. The stellar nomad turned, its drives flaring with renewed power, carrying 2 Velcarians, one seasoned warrior, one young navigator, toward a future neither could fully imagine. Behind them in the ship's memory banks, human faces smiled across the centuries, their love transformed into something unstoppable, hope reborn in the hearts of those they'd cherished as cubs. The galaxy would soon learn what humanity had always known. There's nothing more dangerous than children fighting to save their parents. Nothing more relentless than love that refuses to forget. End.